Hello and welcome to Your Neighborhood Show. I'm Carolyn, and I've started this podcast because I'm really passionate about building community, and I want to bring out stories from our neighborhoods about connection as well as disconnection. And it's come from my own life's journey of growing up in Mumbai, India, in a very connected neighborhood where pretty much everyone knew everyone. Then I came to Australia in 1988, and over my 22-year marriage, got inadvertently disconnected, and then realizing this and wanting to make good my life again. And so I went out on this journey of building a support network for myself. And in the process, I realized that it was a pretty serious situation out there, that there were many others like myself that also feel disconnected at times in their lives. And so the aim of the podcast is basically to draw out those stories of connection and disconnection so that we kind of normalize and be okay with being disconnected at some time in our life, because we all go through things in our lives and it's quite normal. But how do we overcome that? And so that's the aim of the podcast. Welcome again. Welcome to Your Neighborhood Show. I'm Carolyn, and Your Neighborhood Show is simply about drawing out amazing stories of everyday people at times in their lives when they felt both connection and feeling connected and supported, as well as feeling disconnected and unsupported. And the aim is basically to normalize both of them, because I don't think any of us escapes feeling disconnected at some point in our life. And the few of us that feel connected more than disconnected are really lucky. So I've had the privilege of interviewing and having conversations with some lovely people. But today, our guest is Terry Fitzpatrick. And Terry, hello, Terry.
Hello, Carolyn.
Good morning.
Nice to be here.
And Terry is actually one of the leaders of an amazing community that I've been part of called St. Mary's in Exile. And the best way that I can describe St. Mary's in Exile, for me at least, is a community that kind of holds space for individuals and people and its members to explore their spirituality in whatever way works for them. So there's no, it's a safe space, in my opinion, at least. And I came across St. Mary's about 15 years ago, and so I've known Terry for about 15 years.
That's right.
When I myself was searching for support, and the people and the way you all operated kind of resonated with me, and I was a member before I knew it.
Yeah.
So I've actually known Terry for about 15 years, and surprisingly, I've actually only recently really got to know him.
That's because of all those questions you're
yes. So welcome again, Terry, and thank you for accepting, wanting to come here and share your life in an authentic way with our audience.
Thank you for the invitation. It's always interesting to reflect on one's life. And,
yes. So what are you thinking right now?
I'm thinking, God, I hope she asks the questions that I already know.
You're funny. You're quite used to being interviewed and stuff.
I'm normally the interviewer. But being interviewed's a different experience for me.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
So it's interesting being on the other side of the couch.
Yes.
And not being the person under the microscope. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll put you out of your misery, and I'll ask you the first question, which I'm going to ask you.
Yes, that's right. Thank God I do.
And that is, I mean, from the talks that we've had, I kind of know that you've made some really sound decisions in your life at challenging points. And I really admire all of those decisions, by the way. I have told you that.
Yeah, thank you.
I can't help but think that those decisions could have come from, an amazing childhood.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear about that and share that perhaps with our audience.
Yes, I've been very fortunate. I've grown up in community, I suppose. I'm one of 9 children. I grew up in Toowoomba, and I'm the third eldest of that 9 children. And so we grew up in a house where you had to learn to dialogue, talk, and get on with one another and deal with conflict and deal with the good times and the bad. And so my childhood was one of living in community, and we lived in our local parish, and we lived only about 500 metres away from our local church community, and that whole experience of living and being part of a church community that we were very involved in was also part of my formation. So, and the other big thing, I suppose, I grew up in a Catholic ghetto because part of the deal of living and being Catholic was to be part of the Catholic education system. So we went through the Catholic schools as well, and that was another expanding aspect of who I was. So it was interesting when we went to a lot of gatherings, and a lot of our social events were with other members of our religious denomination. So, so I probably lived a fairly narrowly defined cultural dynamic, unlike living in maybe, say, India for you, which was much more culturally diverse. And we were pretty much Anglo-Celtic in that experience as well. So.
And you had 9 children. Wow, that's a community in itself.
That is. It is.
But you also had, I think from what I remember, you had your aunties and
that's right.
You had cousins and
for the first 7 years we lived next to my father's mother and father, and so we lived. There were 2 houses side by side, and I grew up not knowing. Well, I slept in one, but I moved freely between the 2 houses. And in the street there were aunties and cousins, and my grandmother on my father's side lived around the corner. She died by the time I came along, but still that neighbourhood and our family were fairly much present. So that was another aspect of growing up. It was, community and familiarity and acceptance and lots of people and
a village.
Like a village, yeah.
I like to say I was a village kid.
You're a village kid too, yeah.
Sounds like you were too.
I was, in that sense, yeah.
And interesting that you say third eldest.
Third eldest, yeah. So it was interesting. It's probably middle child because the first 5 came fairly close. We're about 1 year apart. Mum had, 5 kids under the age of 7, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was part of that fairly intense. And I saw myself as more of a middle child, and that the next 4 came a little bit later. Yeah.
So did you kind of feel like you were part of having to look after your brothers and sisters?
Yes, very much so. It felt we took that role fairly seriously, and we were pretty much
mini daddies.
That was our responsibility to do that, and I quite enjoyed the task. Yeah, but there were times when it was a bit of a burden. But so we had that experience of taking responsibility for the younger ones, yeah.
And then I think you said your dad moved.
What happened was when Dad decided to set up a business himself, so we moved to the industrial side of town, and we moved into a house where Dad built his business around that. He built a fairly big shed down the back of the house. And he also put a shop out the front where he could sell furniture well. And so we lived and breathed Dad's business. Where Dad was a cabinet maker. He made furniture initially, but competing with overseas market, which quickly became very, very cheap to buy furniture, Dad moved out of that to more buying antique furniture and restoring it. And so he would restore it and we'd sell it in the shop. So as kids, we grew up learning the art of selling and marketing and being part of the business was part of who we were and what we're about.
And business was in the home, like behind your home or something?
No, we lived on top of the business. The business, like a lot of the furniture was stored under the house. A lot of the stuff that was for sale was in the front of the house, in the shop. and Dad was down the back restoring the furniture.
And that's quite common in Australia. I remember when I first came to Australia in 1988,
Yeah.
we got into fast foods.
Oh, okay.
My
Yeah.
ex-husband and myself,
Yeah.
and the fast food shop would be down and the owners lived on top kind of thing. So
Yes, was that
we didn't
fairly
have that in
common?
India. But
You didn't?
No,
Oh, okay.
no,
Oh,
but
right.
it seems like it was
So
quite
it's
a
more
common
an
thing.
Australian thing. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And did you get involved in your dad's business?
Oh, yeah. Well, we were expected to, you know.
Okay,
yeah,
so not
it
by
was-
choice.
It was fairly intense, really. We were always, there was this sort of an on-edgeness that Dad had. And it was always like, if we got home from school and we were, just needing a bit of a break and put the TV on, you almost knew that, oh, God, if you heard those steps coming, Dad's steps coming up, it was like, look busy. Yeah. So that, I think I grew up with a sort of a slight anxiety about living life and feeling that I always had to do stuff. You just couldn't sit around and just sit and watch TV or just relax.
Yes, and especially being the third eldest
Exactly.
as well, you were kind of expected to not only be with your younger siblings but also contribute and support your dad in his business.
Yeah. So there was all that sort of being part of the whole family cell.
Yeah, it was a family business.
A family business. So it was, and we sailed pretty close to the wind. There wasn't much excess.
When you say that, what do you mean by
That
sail
means-
close to the wind?
In terms of just money in, money out.
Yes.
There was not a lot to sort of spread around. So we were
Yeah,
conscious
that kind
of
of sounds like you've had apart from having to work as a young, how old were you when you moved to the industrial area, you said?
I was 8. Yeah,
8,
yeah. So
A bit young for being a business
Yes.
thing. But look,
yeah,
I think it all kind of contributes to our maturity in terms of you're not only, you had this amazing childhood,
Yes.
0 to 7,
yeah,
with all your cousins and grandmothers close by and aunties and whatever.
Yep.
And then you got a little bit of growing up faster
Yes.
than you should,
Yes, that's right.
could
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
But it would have contributed to being, to your being stable-minded
Exactly.
and mature and all of that.
I think one of the
having
really
to-
big things that it did for me was being really aware of the working class. And we were very much conscious we were working class because people used to go, where do you live? I say, Jellicoe Street. What end? Oh, down that. Oh, the industrial end, And everyone goes, oh, I thought you might have lived up, because the other side was, much higher class.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
we were working class. And we were very conscious of that. And so that whole resonance with people of working class background and values is
probably where you got all your social
which is
justice
why
values
probably
from.
why we as a community are in the union building at the moment. I feel at home.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's because a whole lot of that stuff influences the
Yes,
decisions
yes,
you make.
of course.
Yeah.
And then you went. You were in. This was Toowoomba, right?
Toowoomba, that's right. Yeah.
And then after that, you decided at the age of 18, you said you decided to study nursing.
I did. Yeah.
What made you do that? And,
I had an auntie.
Tell us a little bit about, I suppose, what was it like? What was the why you went to study nursing?
Yeah.
And then what was the experience for you as in terms of when you were training to be a nurse and
Yes.
you're a male nurse?
Yes, that's
I mean, I
right,
don't
yeah.
know how many male nurses there were in.
There wasn't a lot,
Okay.
My auntie was a nurse and my sister had gone nursing and I was just hearing stories. We were very close and I really respected both of them and they were telling me stories of work that I thought, I'd like to do that,
Like what? What do you mean, like stories?
Helping people, being part of that group of people that were, there to heal people and
Yes.
to be there for people. So,
Yes.
I'm probably inherited my mother's genes. Mum's very much a people's person, and that whole helping people and being using that side of my personality.
Yeah, yeah.
So the affinity to nursing was great. There wasn't too many male nurses, or almost none that I knew of.
And where did you study?
I studied in Brisbane. I left Toowoomba, came to Brisbane, and I joined a class of over 90 women in my class, and I was the only male. And I very, very quickly...
90 women and you were the only
exactly,
male.
yeah. So that whole
It's a good in a way and not so good in a way.
It was good. It was very good, because, I got on with women very well. And so it was a great thing for me. But also it was an experience of experiencing reverse sexism, because it was very much a profession that was still experimenting with having men there. And a lot of the older women weren't too sure men should be doing this task. So we were always put on trial a bit, and we always felt that we were under the microscope and we had to perform. So, and still, often nurse educators would come into the room and they'd say, "Now, girls," and I always go, "Oh, I'm here." And they go, "Oh, and you too, Mr. Fitzpatrick." So it was sort of like, how do we deal with them? And all the nursing manuals and books were, the nurse, she always.
Yes.
And it was like, so when it came for me to do theology as a priest later on, that whole sexist language when we address someone like God, what's it like for a woman to be constantly bombarded with the he pronoun, and that whole, it's very much a disempowering experience.
Wow.
So I think I quickly, when I saw people using the inclusive pronoun for the divine, I sort of quickly did it, because of partly that experience.
What was the inclusive pronoun? As in just the divine?
It's sort of say God, instead of God himself, well, the God and God's self, So,
Yes.
or don't even go to the word God, use the word
Mystery.
Love, or the beloved, or divine presence, or spirit, or other terms which were non.
Yeah. So when you were in nursing, and you studied at the PA, yeah?
I studied at the PA, yes. Yeah.
So and you said you've had this experience of being the minority, like
That's
extreme
right.
minority, 1 to
exactly.
90.
Yeah, particularly when I first went there, I was the only male living in the quarters downstairs.
So there were nurses' quarters.
Quarters, and upstairs were 800 women in the nurses' quarters.
Goodness
and we were downstairs. I was downstairs initially. And male nurses didn't start coming into until later on in that year.
Yeah.
Those early days of sort of, oh God, what have I done?
I know.
What am I doing
that's
here?
so courageous to just follow what you were passionate about.
Yes,
despite,
exactly. And I think that was part of the shaping of myself, that not to go along with the crowd, but to really do what's feels right for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
In like honoring your own truth.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that seems to be a bit of a pattern in your life.
I've been lucky
what I know.
to have been able to do that.
Yeah, which is why, great admiration.
Yeah, thanks.
But so when you were experiencing this feeling of minority in the nursing, in your training and stuff, how did you deal with that in terms of feeling that feeling of
I think those early days I was a bit lonely, and I think I was lucky that I had a fairly good grounding in my spirituality, and it gave me an opportunity to sort of like start exploring, do I want to continue embracing that stuff that I grew up with?
Which was?
Catholicism and Christianity. And I had to really sort of ask those questions of, does it still fit? And how am I going to make sense of it? And I found it very comforting in those days to really find a sort of a refuge in that belief system and that spirituality and prayer life. And, it was particularly, I think it was the beginning of me thinking of maybe moving into something, embracing that much more full-time, in a full-time way, yeah. But
so it was the kind of seeds were being sown.
Seeds were being sown. And I think it was that early days. So when you were doing nursing too, you're quickly moving into, you're thrust into the real grittiness of life, and you're seeing life and death in your face. Within the first week of me being in the wards working, you're actually having to lay out a dead body, and or you're having to talk to someone who's just being diagnosed with terminal cancer, and they've got a couple of weeks to live, and they just want to talk to you about, how to live life, and yet somehow find yourself listening and being part of those conversations and finding that was forming you and shaping you. And also it was forming questions in my mind, what do I believe about that stuff, So it was, it was a really good place to be asking the big life questions.
And then So that's almost as if you look back on your life,
Yeah.
to be here, you had to be there, and to
Yes.
be there, you had to be there, kind of
Exactly.
thing. There's
It was
this
a
looping.
progression.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes. One thing
And
kind
you're
of.
getting sort of gently nudged along in a
Yeah, no
particular
wrong
direction.
in our lives, is there?
There's not, God. It's like
Even at the time, you might think, "Oh
Yeah,
God, I
no.
wish I was doing something else."
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Life's so brief. And,
And then from your nursing, so you studied nursing, you graduated as a nurse,
I graduated as a nurse, yeah.
and then you said you went back to Toowoomba.
Yes. Well, at that stage, towards my nursing, I'd sort of got involved in a movement within the Catholic Church called the Charismatic renewal movement. And
Yes.
I found a real home there in terms of using the ecstatic prayer experience to come into the stillness. And it was a great...
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the ecstatic prayer experience is not just unique to Christianity. It's across the board. Most religions have it, like the Muslims have the Sufi traditions and the swirling and the moving, and the Aboriginal communities, the dancing and the didgeridoo and that drone sound, which is, more of a pre-rational sound.
Yes.
And
chanting.
And chanting
Hindus,
for the Hindus, it's and movement and, and it was that sort of thing found a resonance for me. And I also found it a very powerful experience to do collectively with other people. And I had the good fortune of going to some of the big gatherings in Australia where there was, 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 people gathered to do and pray in that sort of more ecstatic prayer
So this
experience.
was after your nursing?
This was during my nursing.
Okay.
So I was really finding that I wanted to explore my spirituality and my what this might mean for me in the future. And I was starting to think full-time, ministry and maybe priesthood at that stage. So when I finished my nursing, I had the opportunity to go back to a community in Toowoomba where there was a charismatic prayer movement, and it was Catholic based, so that was good for me as well because my family were involved as well. And I went and lived in an intentional community with 8 other guys, and
Wow.
we were there to
So just to interrupt you, what year was that?
1980, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And we lived this intentional life. So we'd pray in the morning, pray in the evening, and we were part of the wider prayer community called the Holy Name
And
Parish.
how did you meet those 8 guys?
Some of them from school, but most of them had been funneled in through the charismatic prayer group.
Okay, so you knew them from your...
And they joined that, and it was a fairly new movement, and lots of my peers were finding resonance with it and finding it a great way to pray and to be.
Yeah, so you come from your childhood is kind of secure and connected and
Yes,
all of that, and then
that's
you
right.
join the nursing where you experience a bit of being alone and
Initially,
disconnected.
but but that moved on as well.
Yes, and
yeah.
then you go back into living in a community kind of setting with
Yes,
these
exactly,
8 guys.
yeah.
What was that like living in community did you say intentional?
Intentional community. It was good, because I was doing what I really enjoyed and
So
was
what's
passionate
that?
about.
What do you mean by an intentional community?
An intentional community is a group of people get together and they say, hey, we want to support one another in our lifestyle, particularly our spirituality. And so we're going to gather every morning and pray and meditate and encourage one another to live the life that we intend. And then and in the evening it was a similar sort of experience. And so it was and then we were working within the parish community and in the prayer community, serving that as well. So yeah.
Okay, as in that's voluntary stuff, yeah?
Yeah, I was working voluntary. There was another guy who also did what I was doing, and we didn't pay rent. The other 6 guys paid rent, and I was working full time, and the other guy was working full time as well. So.
And so then from there, from living in community with these 8 guys, somewhere at that point you said you decided to be
there was a number of us
the
thinking about
priesthood.
going into priesthood, and about 5 or 6 of us went off to the seminary, and we really thought that we were going to sort of change the church and then have an impact, because
So you've always had this yearning to be of service
Yes,
in some
that's
way
right.
and make
Yeah.
a big difference.
Yes,
in
exactly.
What you had that,
Yeah.
felt like you had that calling. Even joining, being a nurse, is that in
That's
some
right.
Some flavor of that.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so, but it's always been done collectively. I was always out. When I went to the seminary, I went with all these other people who were thinking the same thing. When I was in Toowoomba and working, I was living with other. I was sort of always part of this a collective, if you like.
Yeah.
And even in growing up, it was that. As a Catholic family, we went to church together.
Yes.
I went to school, and your friends are all part of that same sort of cultural collective,
You've had some really good grounding in being supported, I would say.
Exactly, yeah.
with
It's
very
always out of community,
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Which is amazing.
I've
Which is
been-
like it's foundational stuff for our lives, I think,
Exactly,
in my
very
opinion.
much so, yeah.
So, and you haven't been spared when it comes to challenges, from what I know.
No. Well, challenges come with life, don't they?
Of course,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly what
Yeah.
I believe. It's like
Yeah.
part and parcel. You can't have night without day.
Exactly, that's right.
So what has been the most challenging experience in your life?
There's probably been a number, but I suppose what happened was I went through the seminary and I got ordained after 7 years. And the seminary is that whole wonderful, you're with other people your same age and you're similar sort of thinking. You've spent 7 years, with this support group, and then suddenly you're thrust out into rural Queensland, in sort of outback Australia, and you're in a different thing again, So, you have
whereabouts was that? Whereabouts
initially in Roma and then to Gundawindi, and they were great. I really enjoyed country life but it was different, so different from where I was culturally.
A bit isolated? Would it have been isolated?
You never isolate.
Yes.
Country towns are much more connected
Of
than
course.
cities.
Of course.
So everything, you don't just belong to the church in those communities. The whole town owns you, And so that's a really lovely thing, to be in a country town and you have that sort of role within in the town. You're walking down the main street, you very rarely get your shopping done or anything because you're meeting everybody. And a lot of people have come in, like a good half-hour drive or an hour drive to get to shopping. So they're up for a yarn,
Yeah.
And it's a good time because you don't have to spend time getting out to their place.
Yeah.
It's your opportunity to catch. So you're doing your best work downtown, walking down the street.
Yeah, I recall that actually as a young girl.
Yeah.
We would, if you'd say we're going for a walk, a 10-minute walk, and you'd be 2 hours later.
2
because
hours
while
later.
you're walking, you've met 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people,
Exactly.
and you add 10 minutes to each person.
Yeah, and it's so
It's amazing.
rich. It is so beautiful.
But at the time when I grew up, I didn't think of it as being rich.
No.
It was just how we did life in those days.
Exactly.
And I remember coming to Australia, and the first time I got off the plane, and
it would have been awful.
My brother-in-law picked us
Yeah.
up from the airport. And I couldn't see a single soul on the streets in
No,
Australia,
exactly.
whereas India, you've got
It is-
hundreds walking
We are
past.
so impoverished.
Yes,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
thinking
yeah.
to myself, where are the people? Like, if this was India, I'd see hundreds. You could talk, like you could, just pick up anyone and have a chat with them.
Yes.
And I was like, it was very confronting for me. This was
It would have been
1988
awful
for me.
Yeah, awful.
And I remember saying to my brother-in-law, in India, there's a term called band. Band
Yeah.
means closed. Everything
Yeah.
is closed.
Yeah.
And that's, in other words, a strike.
Yeah.
If there's a union strike going on, nobody's allowed to go to work. No
Yeah.
cars on the street. If you drove your car, you'd be stoned.
Yes. Oh, wow.
Literally. So
Yeah.
that's the only time in India when there's no people on the street. And
Yes.
so I arrive in Australia and I get off the plane and I see no people on the street.
Yes.
And I'm saying to Jeffrey, my
Yeah.
brother-in-law, I said,
Yeah.
is there a band on? And he
Yeah.
started laughing. He said, there's a band every day in Australia.
Exactly. It is awful.
So you were telling me about the challenging time in your life.
Oh, the challenging time. Well, I was in a country town, and long story short, I was starting to wonder if I'd continue with priesthood. I fell in love. I had a child to a young woman, and it was a real time of, do I leave, go? I moved to Toowoomba and worked from there as I discerned what my future would be. And after a couple of years in Toowoomba, I decided that I would retrain and continue to work as a priest, but retrain as a social worker. And so that whole time of deciding and decision-making was a very unsettling time. I didn't know where I was going to go. But luckily I went and re-established myself with the St. Mary's community, which I had beginnings with when I was training as a priest. In my second year, I joined the prison chaplaincy team. Peter Kennedy was one of the prison chaplains, and it was there that I got involved with the St. Mary's community. I did my homilies there, and I attended the community there whenever I could when I was in Brisbane. And so when I came and tried to and establish myself back in Brisbane, I found myself back with the St. Mary's community.
Wow, that's
it was
very rich sharing.
It was
Thank
rich,
you. Thank you for that.
St. Mary's was asking the same sort of questions I was in terms of theologically and thinking wise. So I found myself among friends. They're very social justice based, and we were at the beginnings of trying to, how do we better respond to homelessness in the area? How do we better respond to a whole lot of other needs in the Brisbane inner city area? And the community decided to pay a part-time social worker, and that was Karen Walsh. And that was the beginnings of Karen's vision to establish
Micah projects.
a non-for-profit organisation which would better serve the needs.
So almost like you had to go through your dark night of the soul of, you know, in that time of when
uncertainty.
Uncertainty, and you realized you took on the role of being father.
I did, and that was one of the reasons why also I ended up at St. Mary's, because even though when I approached my bishop at Toowoomba, he said you really should go through the right channels if you go back to Brisbane. And the priest, I was given 3 parishes, and in each of the parishes I said, look, I have a couple of things that I need to put down as, things that really need to meet my needs. Yeah. And that was that I have a son, and I need to be able to...
Amazing.
And that I also am wanting to study. Mm-hmm. So, but each of the parishes weren't prepared to take me on. And it was only Peter and the St. Mary's community that were able to do that, or wanted to do that.
Yeah. That's what I meant. One of the things that I said right at the outset said, so amazing that you honored yourself by taking on the role of your role as a father.
Exactly. But I was lucky. I was lucky all along. I've always had a lot of support, and a lot of the decision making was always done with and alongside others as well. So,
But you had to go through that dark night of the soul of whatever happened there.
Yes,
but then you come back to St. Mary's, and
exactly
you had to go there to come here, and you arrive
I had to go through.
Yes.
I had to have that experience of having a child, and trying to work out where I'd be and what I should do to end up at St. Mary's and continue doing what I also loved was working as a...
And you've almost like you were searching all your life and
Yeah.
And exploring your own spirituality.
Exactly,
You joined the
that's
priesthood,
right.
and you were not finding that was quite right for you. So
No,
you're looking
that's
for
right.
different ways that would make meaning
Exactly.
of the whole,
Yeah.
Catholicism or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you arrive back at St. Mary's at a community, and through Peter Kennedy, this amazing community that's so supportive and welcoming and validating and all of that for you, and allow you to express your spirituality.
That's right, exactly. And also the whole need to work in a social justice manner and do that in an authentic way.
Yes.
And that Micah Projects was able to provide that as well. So and to have a group, a community of people who were really trying to find appropriate ways to celebrate this presence of divine that we were starting to understand in a totally different way, in a new cosmology and a new worldview. And trying to do that authentically was with a group of people was very good. Yeah.
And I wasn't a member of St. Mary's back when you all were at the St. Mary's Church in South Brisbane. But I've heard some amazing stories. It was a very practical way of honouring the divine, as in homeless people, and doing all so many different social justice issues were being addressed through Micah as well. So real spirituality in action and that's what attracted me to St. Mary's. But at the same time exploring what is our spirituality actually. It's not just going to Mass and saying Mass and saying the Our Father and the Hail Mary and all of that. There's so much more depth to that. And there could be other religions that we could tap into as well.
Exactly,
that was what I found really attractive.
Exactly, yeah. That we don't have a monopoly on spirituality.
Correct, correct. Yeah, Nobody has.
No, exactly.
In fact, one of my favorite quotes is by Gandhi, and he says that respect for all religions indicates a clear understanding of your own.
Yes,
which I think is beautiful.
That's a beautiful quote. Yeah.
So what's been the most rewarding experience of your life then?
I was reflecting on that this morning, and I think making really wonderful connections and relationships with people, and having them over a long period of time as well. So it's been those relationships and communal experiences that have probably been most rewarding and enriching.
Yeah, and probably what has helped you through your life, from the good times and the challenging times. I don't like to ever say bad times, because
that's right.
They're challenging.
Exactly, challenging
they end
times.
up good if
right. Not a crisis opportunity, but an opportunity.
Correct, yeah.
And so, like, I look at reflecting on growing up in a fairly crowded household, and then experiencing the whole movement into the experience of nursing, being with and alongside other male nurses who also were trying to find their way in a women's world, and finding that support as well within my nursing career, and then the whole ecstatic prayer experience, intentional community, and then moving that into the seminary, and then rediscovering in the seminary, or discovering in a really rich way, that whole liberation theology, thinking that it's with and alongside one another, we liberate one another. And so, and that brought me into another communal experience of being with people in a much more equal alongside basis, and so, and then bringing that thinking and theology to country towns where, there's already that wonderful community that's existing in those places, So
you've had a very rich life.
I've had
Terry.
a very rich life. Yes. Thank you.
That's amazing. So before we finish off today, Terry, I just wanted to share that I remember about 12 years ago when I first came to St. Mary's and we were having a chat. You actually, as an inverted commas priest, gave me the best advice for connecting with my youngest son, Damien, who was the only one with me at the time. Yeah. And that was connect, don't correct. So tell me about that. I mean, where did you get that from? And that's
as a father who's a father.
Yeah. Oh, love it.
I don't know. It really worked for me because, to actually tap into the love and the connection you would like to have with your child, and to keep that in the foreground when you're actually trying to correct, but you don't want to correct for the sake of correcting. You want to correct because you want to keep that relationship. So to connect, to keep that right up front, and to actually have a vision of that relationship, and to be able to keep that the whole reason you're actually having this conversation. Yeah,
Yes. I mean, it's been I've read so many books on parenting because nobody tells you. You're not taught how to be a parent. You're just thrown into this role of being a parent, and you have to just learn as you go, kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah.
And I've read books, and I still made big mistakes.
Yes. And the other thing about it, like, for instance, when you are wanting, because it's connection, you can actually tell stories begin with stories for yourself about something similar that happened to you.
So how did you do that with Jordan?
Sometimes you'd just be able to say, I've done that too. Like it's been something that I really wanted to, punch the guy in the nose as well, because I probably did. I have. And it didn't work for me,
Yeah. So first sharing about yourself.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes to tell a story.
Yeah.
And the other thing with boys particularly, to actually not to sit face to face with them, but to have them in the car next to you, where you can just yarn along and make it a sort of more of a conversation and trying to better the relationship and not try to be the parent who's trying to correct your child,
Yes, I remember reading that tip that with boys, relating to boys is very different to relating to girls.
Exactly.
Girls naturally yak
That's
at any
right.
time of day or night.
That's right, exactly.
But with boys, I remember standing side by side along the sink.
Yes, that's
washing dishes, and that's when I would talk to my boys,
yes,
or when I was
right.
teaching them how to drive, even though my heart was in my mouth.
Yeah, that's right.
And Mom, why are you nervous? I'm driving. I said, my life's on the line.
That's the very reason why I am nervous, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, sorry, you were going to say something.
Good. Yeah, it's with and alongside, and you sort of tap into your own sort of child as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming over here and sharing your life with us. And I think, I thought I learned a lot from you in the last few weeks, but I've learned even more today and basically what I've kind of surmised is that your biggest support in all the challenges in your life has been sharing yourself through your community, with your community, and getting the support back.
Yes,
from
exactly.
that.
That's it.
So thank you so much
Carolyn,
for being part of your neighborhood show and
inviting me to reflect on my life and
pleasure.
To take away that little gem and to really find a place in my heart to continue to be thankful for it. Yeah.
Yes.
And to nurture it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.